Ilonka, welcome to the Scenic Route podcast. It's such a joy to have you here.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here and I'm super excited. This is like my favorite topic to talk about. I can talk about this all day long, every day, nonstop. So
Yeah,
definitely glad to be here.
like you if you're listening, this is really gonna we probably at some point really have to force ourselves to stop because we're both chatty cats. So have mercy with us. But this is really gonna be like a really good episode. So hey, to kind of like get so listeners get an idea of who you are and what you do, will you like we briefly walk us through your story, like the pivotal points when you look back where you're like, ooh, those were the points that made me and helped me to get where I am today.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Ilonka, as you guys already know, and I help mom entrepreneurs to work less, live more. I like to think about it as achieving more because the women that I work with typically are very driven, very ambitious. They do have goals and passions and things that they want to achieve in this life. And I think my journey, it's always interesting looking back in hindsight, right? Everything makes sense when we look back in hindsight. And to me, my journey was very sort of pivotal because I really questioned what I was spending my time on. And it's almost like there's this definite line in the sand between when I was not a mom and when I became a mom. And I was always very entrepreneurial, always had a lot of goals and always had a lot of things going on, doing something like whether that be a side hustle while I was still in my corporate job or going full on into entrepreneurship. I always had this, I like to think of it as a calling in my soul that life is meant to be lived and it isn't just about business or just about motherhood or just about any one particular thing. It is really about striking that balance. And I'm always careful about talking about balance because I think when we as specifically as mom entrepreneurs, when we say we want balance, what we're actually craving is focus. We want to be where our feet are, right? We want to be
Ooh.
present in
Yes.
whatever moment it is that we find ourselves in. And I had this very specific experience with my son. I was sitting behind my computer one evening, late into the night, and he came to me before my husband put them to bed. And he wanted to show me this little Lego boat that he built. And I remember him showing it to me, but I was so busy typing away, doing client work and trying to like just get stuff done that I didn't actually even look him in the eye or even acknowledge this little boat. And on my way to go to bed, after the house was quiet and everybody was already sleeping, I saw this little boat on the kitchen table. And it just broke my heart because I just felt in that moment, like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
It's amazing if we have a passion. It's amazing if we can step into entrepreneurship, be that full time or as a side gig. But it shouldn't take all of us. Like it shouldn't put us in a position
Yes.
where we're not actually living our life and spending time on the things that we want to spend time on.
I hear, sorry to cut a Lily format, that's my editor. I can hear myself on your screen. Like there's an echo. Do you have headphones by any chance that you could plug in?
I do. Let me try.
Because I hear myself and that will be really hard to edit out.
Okay. Let me see.
Let's see how that works. You can still like use the mic.
Yep.
That should be fine.
Okay, let me just see the microphone. That's right. Okay. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. And I hear no echo. Perfect.
Yay!
Okay, so we're gonna, yeah, I just want to like, no, before we gonna like, perfect. So we're just gonna go right in. We were talking about being present and yeah, so yeah, this feels like, oh, this resonates so strongly. Like we're kind of always conditioned. It's this or that, right? Like, oh, I don't know, and as you said, the line in the sand is motherhood for a lot of women. And oh, I never wanted to be, with air quotes, just a mom or and driving my kids around or whatever. Or so it's always kind of like, well, how can I do both? How can I be present in both? And I love what you said. It's not really necessarily balance because I mean, there's no such thing as true balance. Like it's always more like a blend in and a blend out. And I love that this is actually that you said, like, it's actually what actually behind all that is focus and presence. Yeah, right. Because we want to remember the little boat moments, or we want to remember the time when for me, one of my moments is like, oh, I want to bring my son to bed when I want to, like snuff like smell his hair. That's like one of my pet peeves. Like, oh, it's still like he's 3 now, but he still sometimes has like this kind of like a toddler scent or like,
yeah.
Yeah, and I want to be fully present for that, because that's what it is. So like, but how do we do it then? How do we go about this?
It really starts with being intentional with our time. Like, regardless of whether you're a mom or not, we all struggle with time. We all have heard ourselves say things like, I just don't have enough time. And many of the people that I speak to, specifically clients, like some of them aren't moms, right? Although the majority of the people that work with me are mothers, like some of them aren't. And it's always this struggle between how do I balance or manage all the things that are important to me, that matter to me, and how do I make sure that I'm actually spending time on those things? And so to me, it always starts with being intentional with your time. And so if you look back at the past week or past 2 weeks and what you've actually spent your time on, are those the things that really matter to you? And like, I want to say they are, because you've been spending time on them. But once you get conscious about it and intentional about it, you'll probably say, yeah, I would actually want to spend more time on this thing or that thing, or do less of this or that, right? And so it really starts with just knowing what matters in this season. Because I think, you know, when your kids are still young, things look very different than what they might look like. Right? Yeah. Like, even if they're starting to go like the age where they go to school, or, you know, maybe they get into teenager, like it's different seasons. And I think things change as they grow and the seasons change, and what matters will also change. And so we have to just be conscious about what those things are.
Yeah. And I remember I did that too when I was like really looking back one time, like, oh, okay, where I was like, oh, okay, I don't have enough time. I'm like, I know that's a bullshit story we're telling ourselves, but then I'm like, okay, but how do I actually like spend my time? And I look back the last 2 weeks and like really did like 30 or 60-minute like increments, and was like, what did I do? And also, like, my phone helped me, obviously, because it tracks everything. And I was looking at the data, and I was like, yeah, did I actually do something that smart on Instagram for, like, 2 hours a day? Like, probably not. Like, if I don't remember what exactly I did, or with whom I had, like, a meaningful conversation with, I don't know, maybe I was just doom scrolling.
Yeah. And I still catch myself in moments like that, you know? And so this is not, I think, a one and done process. It's definitely something that we check in with regularly. And like, you know, when you reach the end of your week and you feel like, ugh, like I haven't achieved the things that are important to me that I wanted to achieve this week, like then it's time to start questioning what is it that I'm spending my time on.
Yeah. And I mean, time in itself is so weird anyway, right? Like, I mean, how the perception of it changes, like how it's fluid and how it's sort of bended. Like, I mean, yeah, but you know, like I was really doing this experiment one time. I was like, it sounds very woo-woo metaphysical. I was like, okay, if I got an hour now to really deep work, so this is what I want to achieve in that hour. And when I do that, I always get those things done in that hour. Yeah. Right? Or another example was just like, I would like when we had a daycare that was a bit further away, we had to go by bus. So I had to go to take the bus to pick up my kid. And I would always be like, just, you know, before I would be like, oh, I got to hurry there. I got to pick him up fast so I can make like the 5:12 bus back. Ugh. And obviously we would always fucking miss that bus because he would be like, oh, a bird, oh, a water fountain, right? in the moment, I kind of let go of that, where we just like, I gotta go pick him up. We go home. And kind of like releasing the time expectations. I know this sounds very weird unless you have a similar experience. And and he still was like, oh, fountain, oh, bird. But the interesting thing was every time we came at the bus stop, there was either we were on time or the bus was late or whatever, but we always made that bus because we just were like, okay, we just kind of let go of time.
Yeah. I love that.
But it's so weird, right? How time is something fluid almost.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you think about time and the way it is defined, I think Einstein, if you go and Google it, Einstein actually has
said something very smart about it.
He actually said that time is our perception of it. It isn't actually the hours and the minutes on the clock. And if you think about defining for yourself what a short time and a long time is, right? We've all had moments where 10 hours felt like 10 minutes and 10 minutes felt like 10 hours. It was a good day,
right? I don't know, at Disneyland, it was like that shitty meeting you had to take and you were stuck forever.
Yeah, exactly. I always think of like the last month of pregnancy as like the time would just not pass. And so we all have that feeling of, I felt amazing in this moment or moments.
And time collapsed.
Yes, exactly. And so that to me is sort of my starting point and where I start my work with my clients in terms of redesigning that relationship that they have with time. Because I think we're so used to managing time and implementing all the time hacks and buying new planners, doing all the things, right? And there's nothing wrong with those things. They can actually contribute to our life. But if you start there, you'll probably find yourself with a planner halfway through the year that isn't even filled in, or apps that you don't use, right? Or now you're creating free space in your week, but you're just filling it with stuff again. And so
I'm just looking at my bookshelf where I have like an empty, really lonely copy of like the tomato time management, whatever thingy. And I'm like, I think I've once got it. I've like, it has a very lonely life on the bookshelf. Like I've never
Yeah, we all do that.
They don't have a purpose, but
yeah, exactly.
But so like there's another, like before we go into like what we said, like it's a perception and how we feel actually bends or stretches our perception of time. Before we go into that, I feel there's always also like such a deep layered question of not having enough time, of not doing enough. Like one is that this is one of the worst like Pinterest motivational quotes, because it actually isn't. It's kind of like the saying there, Beyonce also just has like 24 hours in her day. Like go be like Beyonce. And I'm like, yeah, it's true. But like she most likely has a different support system than you do.
Yes, absolutely.
So time is not equal, right?
Yeah.
Like it's how it's steeped in so much privilege that if you can outsource who cooks your meals, who does the grocery shopping, who picks up the kids, who whatever. I also got 24 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But we're kind of like doing all of this.
Yeah. And I think that is a very important distinction to make. Like we need to stop comparing ourselves with what's happening in other people's lives, because that's half of our problem. Is we look at the Instagram images and the perfectly curated lives of people online, and we think that they have it all together, that they, we're doing something wrong, we're not there yet, and we have this like feeling of that we're behind or something.
The feeling, yes, the sensation of feeling behind. Yes.
And so when you spoke about, I'm not doing enough or I'm not achieving enough, like I want to change the perspective on that a little bit and challenge you to say that enough is really a decision. Like you decide what is enough. And so if you are aware of what it is that you want, like you need to have that clarity, right? And this was such an eye-opening experience to me, because when I got into the online space, like I joined Russell Branson's 2 Comma Club coaching program and just got deep into like marketing my business and building funnels and all these things, right? And so there's this like big expectation almost that you have to hit the $1 million mark in like 12 months, right? And I was just starting in the online space, not even giving myself the time to just absorb like what's possible in this world, right? And so I got to a point where I actually realized, like, why am I setting this goal for myself to achieve or get $1 million, create $1 million? Do I really even want that right now? You know?
Yes. Am I willing to do what it like? Willing to do what it takes? Like that sounds bad. Sometimes that sounds like you have to do more than it takes. But like there's always, regardless of what you do, right? You're setting. It's always a choice for something and against something.
Absolutely.
And that the decision against something, is it worth it?
Yeah. And so to me, I just really had to stop and ask myself, in this season of my life, what matters to me? And do I want to do it fast or do I want to do it slow? Like what is that urgency behind it all? And is it really
Isn't
even
everyone
mine? Like,
gonna say I want to do it fast?
Of course, like why, like why wouldn't me, right? But if you think about just what you said just now, like always think about Mel Robbins that says she would love to have the 6-pack abs, right? But she's not willing to do what it takes to get the abs. And so she's just parting ways with that idea. And so to me, I did not want to, like I reached a point where I realized I'm losing control over what is really important to me in the hope that I'm going to achieve this goal and working really hard to make it happen.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that that shouldn't be your goal, but to me, I was really just reaching a point where I felt like it's okay for me to go slow and it's okay for me to do it in a way that still honors who I want to be as a mom and as a wife. And yeah,
absolutely. I mean, this podcast is called The Scenic Route, not the highway, hustle highway. So I mean, you get it. But yeah, it's so interesting, right? And especially what you said also about Robbins, like and with that, I mean, it requires a lot of self-knowledge and really being honest with yourself, but it's also almost like a process of grief, because you're letting go of something that, I mean, the 6-pack thing is, I mean, might be a superficial example, but we all have ideas of, if we grow up, if we're finally grown up, this is the version I want to be, whatever, the successful business person, the thoughtful mom, the attentive spouse, whatever it is, right? You have certain images of how you see yourself, and images that are deeply ingrained, and it will mean something to you if you see yourself this way, and parting with that is hard.
Yeah, I think there's always a level of letting go of something as we're moving into that next level. And I think that's why it's so important for us to also give ourselves some time as we're moving from one level to the next, and being okay with the things that we need to leave behind in order to, like, I don't even want to see it necessarily as something that I'm leaving behind, rather than something that I'm shedding almost, like, you know, really just releasing that layer and stepping into that new whatever it is.
Yeah, so, I sometimes call it graduating, like I'm graduating.
Yeah, love it.
Because it is true, right? It's, I mean, you probably never leave something fully behind that has been, I don't know, that you've held on so dearly for a long time. But yeah, I love that. It's kind of like the shedding, and it doesn't happen overnight, right? It does, and then we go back to time. It happens on its own timing. It's not happening in the time frame you give to it. Like, okay, I'm gonna shed my former selves and ideas and visions, blah blah, I don't know. I have time until like September 13, and then I'm like, no, I
have
gotta
to be a
done.
new person.
Gotta be done, right? Oh, like January 1st is coming. Gotta be a new person by then. Like,
yeah,
that going back into that, like time does what it does, like does what it wants in itself, but at the same time, we can influence it, and then we go back
absolutely.
to we close the bracket to how you can bend it.
Yeah, and this is where that exciting sort of middle ground lies between the metaphysical, like you said, and really being open to attracting those experiences that we want to attract, but also the more practical side of it of, okay, how do I use what I have? How do I use the 24-hour bag that I receive every morning, right?
Yeah.
Can't save. I need to actually use it today.
Yeah, it's like energy. Yeah, it's like solar energy. There's not really like so much time you can save it, but yeah.
Yeah. And so what am I going to do with that? Because at the end of the day, like, unless we're monks living on a mountain, like, we are constrained to the hours and minutes that are on this clock. And so we need to find a way to make the most of it.
Yeah. And I mean, we're all embedded in communities, in societies. We have our kids have schedules.
So it's still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have clock changes from winter to summertime that no one needs. Like, it's yeah.
Exactly. So we have to start looking at where do we start? Like, if we want to start managing our time better, to me, I always found that really difficult, because I am definitely a planner. I'm definitely someone that's very analytical, and I can time block the crap out of myself, but I didn't find it useful because I still felt bad. I was still overwhelmed. I was still running and rushing from one thing to the next, constantly grumpy and irritated. And so I really started questioning, what is it that I really do have control over? Because we don't have unicorn weeks as mothers, right?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes things break, kids fall.
Sometimes we get a lucky
noses
break.
bleed. Yeah, like, but you can't count on it, right? Life happens.
Oh, and God. Curveballs left and right.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of trying to manage the circumstances, there's actually something else that we have total control over. And this is how I approach time management, because I feel like you can't really manage time. But we can manage our emotions, because to me, time is emotion. And if we take it back to the example of, what is a long time, what is a short time, it's how you felt in that moment.
Exactly. I mean, we all, as you said, we all know that brilliant day we had and went by in like the blink of an eye, and then meeting that stretched for days, or the last weeks of pregnancy in a hot July, and you're like, I've been pregnant for 100 million years.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that, right? Like, I mean, I see that and this goes through a lot of areas of our society as well, right? We try to cure circumstances or symptoms or whatever that we appear as kind of like quick fixes, instead of like almost kind of like returning back to the one thing we have some control over, and this how we feel, how we approach things. So in that sense, it really is like, we're not managing time, but we're managing our emotions.
Yeah, that's where we start. Like, you can, I definitely work on practical ways for my clients to use their time better, to create the systems and the processes that they need to actually work less, right? But we have to start with our emotions, because if we feel bad, if we feel crap, any action we take, any decisions we make will be affected by those emotions. And so we always want to keep ourselves, not always, because sometimes we do want to feel bad, right? If we are in a grieving process because someone maybe passed away, then there's nothing wrong with feeling sad or feeling the grief, right? So this is not an exercise in not feeling your emotions.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Like, it's always kind of like, oh no, it's not like sort of a toxic positivity. It's you have to build capacity to sit with the fun feelings, the ones that make you feel light and expansive, and the ones that make you feel worrisome and kind of weighing you down. But it's just two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, exactly. And so when we approach it, we look at what emotion are you spending the majority of your time in? Like if you think about the past week, right? Were you overwhelmed the most, like for the majority of the time? Were you stressing, worrying? Like what was your emotion that you lived in? Because if you look at the results that you have created in your business, it is directly connected to that emotion. And this is where we need to start if we want to make a real change, specifically in our business, because I'm working with mom entrepreneurs, right? And so to us, any time that we spend in our business, we want that to be time well spent, right? We want it to be something that we can hit the end of our week and we can feel proud and achieved, and I did what I came to do. And so we have to start looking at how we are feeling, and that is really impacting our actions. And so we always start at that place, and then we can look at the easy little time hacks and tactics that you can implement
just get the
to make
last
your life
drop
easier.
out of that lemon. Yeah, I love that. Like, I mean, I can already hear all the buts, all the mental buts. Everyone who's listening has like but they're just waiting for like the pause to have like but. So let's go out in the open with that. Like, but how do I manage my time? Like, or how do I, so okay, I get it. I should feel positive and joyous and expansive and light and blah, blah, blah. But I don't know. My kid was sick and got sick in the night. I haven't slept. The morning already went like, I don't know. Day is crap. I don't know. Everything got not according to plan. Adding in general worries. I mean, we're still in a pandemic. We have like national health concerns. We have personal health concerns. I don't know. We are going into a recession. Like politics is shit. Like, I don't know. There's a flood in Pakistan. Like, it's just right. Like everything is like just falling down on you. And I mean, how else can you like, how can you feel anything else than overwhelmed? Like, I get it.
Yeah.
How the fuck do we get out of that? Ilonka, like, tell us.
So the first question that you always need to ask yourself is this emotion serving me, right?
Yeah.
Because as I just said, sometimes you do want to feel
I sometimes want to feel a bit of rage, because rage sometimes is really good.
And sometimes that can actually propel you. That can be used as fuel. Sometimes it serves you to be angry, right?
Yes.
But we need to question whether the emotion that we are feeling in this moment, whether that is actually taking us towards what it is that we want to create. So if we talk about business specifically, if you're constantly overwhelmed in your business, chances are you're probably procrastinating on a lot of things. You're not really taking the kind of action that you want to be taking, and your results will show that. And so we start by questioning whether this emotion is serving us or not. And it's very easy to find the answer to that, because typically if you feel bad, it's not serving you, unless you need to feel bad in that moment, right? But so we start always with questioning whether it's serving us, and then we can decide whether we want to shift that emotion or not. And it's always fascinating, because I think we've been conditioned to believe that we are at the mercy of our emotions. We have zero control over it. It just sort of happens to us. Like, how do we change it, right? But you feel the way you feel because of what you're focusing on, where your attention is, right? And so the easiest way to make that shift is to shift your attention, to shift what you're focusing on in that moment. And the second thing is the meaning that you're attaching to everything in your life. Like, we look at our to-do list and we think that we have so many things that we need to do this week. The majority of those things are probably the shoulds that we have created for ourselves. Right?
Yes.
And things that nobody actually, like nobody told us we should be doing this. Maybe some people did, but
someone surely told you you should build a big funnel.
Yes, exactly. So now you are attaching meaning if you don't do those things, if you don't achieve those things, the meaning that you attach
as successful as blah blah. I'm not gonna do
yes.
the
Or
$1
I'm a
million
bad
in a
mom
year.
if I don't do this, or I'm a bad wife, I should be doing that, right? And so we need to really start questioning those boxes that we've created for ourselves and just really question whether it is still even relevant or is it even ours? Because sometimes it's something that's just sort of passed on because of this like generational women are supposed to be XYZ, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And we just sort of take that on. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And also what I sometimes feel, and I'm sure a lot of people, I know it in my clients, a lot of my clients are highly sensitive people and also HSPs and or empaths and or projectors, and like I'm an empath and HSP and a projector, so it's all coming together. It's like a shit fest sometimes. So sometimes to me it's really hard to distinguish, especially when I don't know, when I'm in the usual rush of life, to really differentiate between, oh, is this actually a feeling I am feeling? Like, can I attribute a somatic experience to this feeling? Or is it maybe, just maybe, something that has been passed on to me, right? I mean, we all most likely notice when we're at an airport and everyone is stressed, you also start getting super anxious, and unless you're like calm as fuck, then you don't. But like, you're right, but we sort of pick up energies that are around us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how are we dealing with that? It's not just how we feel, right? It's also what is like coming into our space.
Yeah. And I think we can spend a lot of time trying to figure out whether it's our emotions or someone else's. The bottom line is it serving you or not? Do you want to feel that way right now or not? And just putting that sort of gaining the awareness that I have a choice here. I have a say in this matter. And if you don't like it, you get to change it. And it's really as simple as that. And so there's this emotional scale, right? Sometimes we feel angry and then we sort of move to frustrated and then we sort of move to the next, right? And so there might be a gradual shift from like the extreme emotion that you're feeling. Because going from like really angry to super happy, it's really difficult in that moment.
Oh God. And I mean, and most of the time, right? Like, I mean, everyone who has gone through burnout or depression, like we're not even striving for goddamn happy. We're just striving for normal baseline.
Yeah. Right. And so we can use that. Like that is a natural way that we actually process and deal with emotions. Like there is a scale that we move along, let's call it the emotional scale, that you feel a certain emotion and the next one might not be happy. It might be frustrated, right? But as soon as you can feel that shift in, okay, I'm not angry anymore. I'm just irritated, right? It might be subtle, but there is a shift happening and gradually, because we can't stay in one emotion forever. It's not possible. We weren't built that way. And so even if you just leave yourself, even if you just do nothing, you will eventually move out of that emotion. But we want to actually harness this power that we have with our thoughts and our attention, what we're focusing on. And we want to be a little bit more proactive and guide ourselves to the emotions that actually allow us to go and do the things that we want to do. And so if we're in an emotion, instead of aiming for the happy, right, maybe just start with, how do I get myself out of the anger right now? And the first place is where your attention is. You're probably focusing on the thing that made you angry. And so just going a little bit more general, like starting with appreciation. Like, I appreciate that the sun is shining right now, or I appreciate that I didn't kick this person in the face, right? Like that I actually had the restraint.
I prefer the second example.
And so just looking at what you appreciate in this moment, I always find it difficult, especially when I'm like angry or in a very frustrated like emotion. I don't go for gratitude because in that moment, it's really hard for me to find something to be grateful for. And I know I can't be grateful and angry at the same time. But I actually then feel bad because I have so much to be grateful for, right? And so why can't I feel grateful? And so looking at something that you appreciate, like the wind coming into your house on a hot summer's day, or the sun shining, or even the rain, like if you love the rainy season, right? And so just shifting your attention to that will bring an immediate change in the action, even if it's subtle. And that's where you start.
That's, I mean, I just thought of like, okay, what, I mean, let's call it like the shadow emotion, right? Like, I feel every one of us has that kind of emotion where it's really, really hard to get out to. For some, it's overwhelm. For some, it's fear. For some, it's sadness. And for me, I'm at my worst when I feel resentment. That is really, really hard for me to get out to. Like, I can tell myself the sun is shining all day long. This is not going to get me out of resentment. So it's really about knowing yourself and how, and especially when you're starting out. Like, I mean, I don't know, classic conditionals, high achiever. I relied on my head. I still rely probably too much on my head because it's good head and I like it. But there were times when I had a strong body head disconnect. And it was really hard to me to know. And this sounds super simple, but to actually know what I'm feeling, to give a name to what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Like when you're
and
not
that's okay.
on yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it was hard because everyone's like, well, identify your feelings. But I'm like, but I'm not at Zen Master Ninja level. So I don't know what I'm feeling. Tell me.
So an easy way of, if you are like that, if you can't really name the emotion, an easy way to start is just asking yourself where I'm feeling it. And maybe that is like in your chest, in your stomach, and like, how does it resonate for you, right? Maybe it's a tightness, maybe it's a feeling of heaviness. And again, it doesn't even matter if you don't name the emotion. It's really questioning, does this emotion make me feel like I want to be open and out? Or does it make me feel like I want to, shrink and just stay in a little bowl, keep myself away from everybody and everything.
Get out of Ben and Jerry's.
And so depending on how that's making you feel, maybe it is necessary for you to take a little bit of a break, right? And go and binge some Netflix because you've been pushing yourself just way too hard and you haven't given yourself enough time for just rest. And in other instances, it might actually be necessary for you to go the opposite route and open yourself, because if you keep putting yourself in this little box and, I'm not going to interact with anybody, and you're never going to build a business like that. You're never going to, you have to come out of your shell a little bit, right? And actually speak to people and do things. And so it's really just gaining the awareness of, is it serving me in this moment or not? And if it's not, that's when we want to make the change.
Yeah. And especially like most of my clients are service providers. And especially then it's really hard because, you cannot provide. I mean, I always like when I in my coaching, at the beginning, when I work with people who are like, oh, but I don't know, it always feels selfish to take care of myself or blah, 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 or blah. I'm always kind of like, well, look at this way. If you're a service provider and you're actually doing the service, people come to you because they want to work with you specifically because of all the stories you have, because it's you. And so you actually are your business biggest asset. So no business person in the whole world would not tell you to protect your asset.
There's actually there's actually a saying that says, you have to protect the golden goose, and you are the golden goose.
Yes,
and so we have to take care of ourselves as well. And so one of the things that I actually teach my clients to do is to have a plan for their time. And so to do this ahead of the week, right? So don't do it on Monday morning when you need to do something Monday morning or Tuesday morning. Like I prefer to actually do it like ahead of time.
Yeah.
Because then I'm
most
thinking
likely when
with
you're
my
in a good space as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so when I'm like thinking with my prefrontal cortex versus in the moment, I'm seeking instant pleasure, right? And so just have a plan for your time and schedule the white space. Schedule the I want to Netflix, you know,
or I
binge
want
the
to go for a walk or lay on the beach or whatever.
Whatever.
You do. Yeah.
Because when you have that block in your calendar, and I'm not saying that you have to schedule yourself minutes apart, right? But if you do have it in your calendar and you planned for it ahead of time, then it takes away a lot of the guilt that's associated with just not doing or achieving, like doing something just purely because you love doing it. Because everything doesn't have to be connected to a result, right? Sometimes.
Oh God. Yes, absolutely. And I also feel that this is so important. Like, even if you can only air quotes, block out 30 minutes every other day, that's perfect, right? Because start where you're at. Because there's always this misconception of, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna pause, take care of my emotions, when I have this big eat, pray, love moment. And most likely it's never gonna happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? We have to schedule it in like into our business, into our everyday lives, into how we, I don't know, why we drive the kids to school, why we go to the doctors, why we whatever we do to feed our cat. Because that eat, pray, love, waiting for that eat, pray, love moment will not gonna help.
Yeah. And if you think about your week specifically, like if you start planning your week, don't look at everything that you need to do. Like, don't ask yourself, because remember, if you ask your brain a question, it's going to answer it, right? And so if you ask it a crappy question, you're probably going to get a crappy answer.
Okay,
that's
what's the not crappy question to ask your brain for your to-do list?
So instead of asking yourself, what should I do this week, or what do I need to do this week, ask yourself, what is the outcomes that matter to me? What are the outcomes that I want to create this week? And this doesn't necessarily just relate to business. It could be, I want to be more connected with my husband, or
I want to be more rested. Okay, sleeping.
Yes,
drinking
exactly.
more water. Yeah.
And from that space, you plan your week. And so I always start planning my week. I do actually block out my calendar. I know a lot of people don't like doing that. It feels too restrictive for them. So you really have to find something that works for you. But if you have a plan, if you set the intention for your week and you know that this is how I want to feel this week, this is how I want to show up this week, this is the important things that matter to me, because even then, driving the kids to school, for instance, isn't now just driving the kids to school. Now it's an opportunity for you to connect with them, to walk with them, ask them
about
questions.
Their day ahead, or
And so when we look at it from that way, we're shifting the focus from, oh, I have all these things to do, to, wow, I'm getting the opportunity to connect with my child, or I'm getting the opportunity to make an impact, or enjoy nature, take in this beautiful place that I'm living in, or whatever it is, right? And then just put it in your calendar and start with those times for you. Like, start with you. You have to take care of you first, because you cannot, it sounds very cliche because it is, you cannot give from an empty cup. And so you have to start there.
It has a reason why, like, when you're flying, they tell you to put on the vest yourself first. I mean,
exactly.
They got a point.
There's a reason,
at the same time, I'd say if you do that, the next thing that most likely will happen is you blocked it in. So far, you're so good. You're clapping yourself on the shoulder. And then you're like, oh, okay. I don't know. I really want to finish this, but okay. So I'm just gonna like cross that off, like that white space. Just gonna cross it off.
Yeah, so, I'm not feeling it right now.
Yeah. So boundaries. Am I right? Yep. Boundaries.
Yeah. And also, like, if you think about, there's three things that's always fighting for your attention. The first one is your fears, right? The things that you are afraid that's going to give you pain in some way. The other thing is pleasure. Like, we want to feel good, and typically we want to feel good right now. And so we go for the instant.
We've been conditioned this way.
Exactly. And then the third thing is other people's demands, right? We are constantly bombarded by people asking us to do things.
Well, especially
and
people who grew up to be women. Like,
yeah,
we have been raised as caretakers of like,
yeah,
we have to take care of others. We have to anticipate other people's needs before they have them themselves.
yeah, exactly. And so this is where you have to set those boundaries. You have to set the boundary in terms of what matters, why it matters. You have to know why you're doing this thing, because if you don't, if you forget why you're doing it, or you don't even have a compelling reason why, it's very easy for you to just go in that moment, I'll just do this later, or it isn't important, right?
And later, so, we all know, never gonna
doesn't happen. Exactly. So really look at, this is, to me, this is where coaching is the best part of it, because we all have those moments where we're like, I know I said I'm going to eat healthy this week, but this cupcake looks amazing and I'm just rather going to do this right now. And so this is the work that we have to do once we have the plan, once we know this intention is what I set for myself in that moment where I was actually channeling my higher self, right? Why is it that I now not want to do this thing? Why do I want to procrastinate on doing this thing that I know is the good thing for me to do right now?
Yeah.
And that's the work. That's where we start questioning, what is the holdback? What is the limiting belief? What is the thing that's asking me to shift attention to something else?
Yes. Yeah. And agreed. And I also feel it's so important, especially with the cupcake example, because food is a brilliant example. And there are also days where it's just fucking okay if you want to eat the cupcake just because it feels fun to eat cupcakes with the sprinkles on top, right? Like, but then also coaching comes in. It's what happens next. It's you eat the cupcake, fine. You then I don't know. You make a healthier dinner, whatever, no biggie.
Yeah,
and that's where coaching comes in. Or you just keep on crapping on yourself for that one time you had that cupcake, although you had a different intention.
Yeah, exactly. And so that, it's very important for us to, yes, have the intention, yes, have the plan, but also know that you are a human being with a human brain, and you are going to fall off the bus at some point, and that's totally fine. Instead of beating yourself with a stick, just take back your attention to the thing that is important, the thing that you do want to achieve, and just go for it. Like, we all have those moments, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think, the thing to me is really the majority of the time, the balance of, are you always saying yes to the cupcake?
Yeah.
Or is it the occasional thing that, I just got off track and I'm just going to get back? Because that happens. It's actually a normal part of the entire process. So, but if it's happening all the time, then there's work to do. This needs to be uncovered.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about balance, and not to kind of like, to sort of manage your emotions, which we're going full circle. Like, so tell me, to kind of like wrap this up beautifully. I know we've talked about a lot about unpleasant emotions, and especially listeners with little kids at home will be like, I got that. There's one emotion I have a lot. It's mental load, and it's overwhelmed. Like, so I know you brought something with us today for our listeners today. The Done with Overwhelm toolkit. I already love toolkit. The word toolkit, and not like strategy or hack or blueprint or whatever, right? Because they're different tools, and you just gotta try and see what works for you, right?
Yeah,
you want to tell me something about it?
Yeah. So overwhelm, I think, is such a passionate topic for me, because I struggled with it for so long. I think the words "I am overwhelmed" was literally my mantra for like years, because I said it 1,000 times a day. And so this is something that, it's been so normalized, I think, that, it's normal for us to feel overwhelmed. And
like, you've always felt this way, and it's just part of who you are.
It's just, it's just what it is. It's just something we deal with. It doesn't need to be. And so I created this toolkit because I discovered that there's certain things that we keep doing that keep us stuck in overwhelm. And so I include the 4 mistakes that we make that keep us stuck in overwhelm, but also how do you actually now stop making those mistakes, right? And then
I mean, you always have to first know what you're doing, and then you can stop it, right? So it makes sense.
Exactly. And understanding what is really causing your overwhelm, because it's not the number of things you have on your to-do list.
Yes.
And so there's 3, I call them the powerhouse questions that you can ask yourself that will shift your attention from the overwhelm to actually getting back to productivity, but in a way that it's joyful, that you can actually have fun with it, right? I also include a checklist. So when life is throwing you those curveballs, there's a very quick and easy checklist that you can run through to make sure that you actually get yourself back on track and that you stay sane, right? Amidst the chaos. And the last thing is like emergency affirmations, because, and like affirmations, you know, I want to say this about affirmations because we can't bullshit our brains to believe things that aren't true.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So this is not about going, I am a millionaire, and you know you're not.
Yeah.
You don't have it in your bank account.
Very simple things of, I am worthy. If your brain fucking believes it, you're not.
Exactly. So I always say this as a little bit of a disclaimer or a caveat is that you need to find the statements that really ring true for you.
Yes, no
and so these are examples, yes. But, you know, having these, let's call them incantations, affirmations, like powerhouse statements or thoughts.
Potato.
That, yes, what you can say to yourself that you really feel in your body is actually making me feel good. And so you have to find these. I give you a couple of examples, things that I love that work for me. Yeah. And it's always a positive statement, right? But it needs to be something that your brain actually believes. And so sometimes we give it like a bridge thought, right? If you can't believe yet that you are worthy, you might be able to believe something like, I'm learning how to love myself. I'm learning how to.
Yes, I love bridge affirmations. Yes.
Yeah. And so I included those as well because we underestimate the power of our belief system and the thoughts that are continuously running in our heads. And if we can actually just recognize the thought that's attached to that emotion that we feel, then we can actually start questioning it. And I found the more I question those thoughts that aren't serving me, the more my brain actually releases them. Because once you start shining the light on it, you actually realize
shadows disappears.
It doesn't make any sense. And so sometimes it's just as easy as that. And then it just sort of dissipates.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's easy, but it's simple, but it's not easy sometimes.
Yeah, it's definitely not always easy. Yeah.
Hey, I have always one last question, and that's always mostly because I'm very curious. And I always need new material. What book are you currently reading?
Ooh, I'm actually reading, I always forget this lady's name, but let me open it real quick. So it's a financial book because I love the subject of money. And so let me just get it real quick. So it's by Tiffany Alicia. It's Get Good with Money. It's 10 simple steps to becoming financially whole, which, when I saw the cover, it just really excited me and I wanted to read more a little bit about it. I know there's actually a Netflix documentary. I haven't watched it yet, where she's also in there. And so, I'm all for it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with you and for sharing all your wisdom and stories here on the Scenic Route podcast. Ilonka, it was such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.